So the whole point of our doing daily ACT prep in English is to try to help you understand that this is not a guessing game. So hopefully at this point you feel as if you can look at an item, drill down and figure out what the basic grammatical mistake is and then solve it. So that you're not just randomly guessing or picking answers, but you're actually thinking about very deliberately what the correct answer is. So what I want us to do for the first passage, that's the first 15 items here, I want us to think about how would you label the grammatical problem that exists, and then how do you go about fixing that problem. I've gone ahead and labeled a couple of them so that you can see what I mean by that. For examples, number 14 and 15, the last two items in the passage, those are typically what we call non-standard format questions. It will say, answer these two questions for the passage as a whole. So as a whole, think about the order of ideas for question number 14, and as a whole, think about the author's purpose. Those author's purpose questions are the ones like, if the writer were intending to write an essay that did this, did it? And you'll have two that say yes and two that say no. You have to pick which one has the correct rationale. Notice that I've got three questions labeled as transition, two labeled as diction. That should tell you that a lot of questions on the ACT are about word choice, and a lot of questions on the ACT are just about signal words and transitioning from one idea to the next. What we're going to attempt to do in working this passage is we're going to try to label each question and then try to reason through to find the correct answer. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. So let's look at number one together. It says this. In 1948, graduate students Norman Woodland and Bernard Silver took on a problem that had troubled retailers for years, how to keep track of store inventory. Look at your choices. What's this a question about? What changes in the choices? Commas. So you could say this is a question about commas, and that's true, but I would probably say that it's a question about commas that are used for an appositive. Remember that an appositive phrase is a noun or pronoun that renames a previous noun or pronoun. So what you've got here is you've got graduate students, and then they're renamed with specific names. If you put commas around their names, remember that means you could take a razor, slice it, extract it, and the sentence would not lose any clarity. So if you do that, if you were to take those names out, does it lose clarity? Does it lose specificity? It does, because otherwise it just says graduate students, and that could be anybody. So we need it. We call that essential. And if it's essential, you're not going to cut it out, so don't put the commas around it. So which choice does that? That shows that you keep their names, you don't cut it out. C does that. So C is the correct answer. Does everyone understand what I'm talking about when I say that you could take razor blades and cut it out? So if you see commas in the middle of a sentence and there's a kind of words in between it, what you should think is, if I cut that out, does this sentence lose part of its meaning, or does it lose part of its grammatical correctness? And in this case, you've got to have it, otherwise it just says graduate students and you don't know who it's talking about. Okay, question number two I've labeled as transition. It says, inspired by the dots and dashes of Morse code, however, Woodland and Silver created a system of lines that could encode data. You've got however, in other words, and consequently. Can you choose between those three or among those three? Probably not. So if you can't choose among them, what's the best answer? Get rid of it. And that happens to be the right answer. Delete it. You just don't need the transition in that context. All right, number three. If I were to tell you that number three is a wordiness problem, what does that tell you? What's going to be the best answer? Shortest answer. What is the shortest answer? No change is the correct answer. Tell me why the wrong answers are the wrong answers. It's too much, right? It's doing too much. Because it says distances separated, locations set apart, links distant. So you're saying basically the same thing twice. It's redundant. It's too much information. Can you look at a question like that now and recognize it as a wordiness question? If all three of your extra choices are really long, then chances are it's a wordiness question. And if it's wordiness and you can recognize it as that, shortest answer is going to be the right answer. Shortest answer is not always the right answer, obviously, but if you recognize it as a wordiness question, then you know that the shortest answer is the best one. Question number 4, I would call it a relevance question. In other words, it's asking you if a detail is relevant, if it's germane to the topic. The writer is considering deleting the preceding sentence. So that means taking out the sentence that comes before. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? So you'll notice number 4 is boxed. The sentence that it's talking about is the sentence that comes before it. It says the first line was always present. Now, in order to answer this question, you've got to read the next sentence. Depending on the presence or absence of the remaining 3 lines, up to 7 different arrangements were susceptible. Now, think with me for just a moment. It's not asking you anything about that sentence that comes after the box. Would it make sense if you took out the sentence that said the first line was always present to then say, depending on the presence or absence of the remaining 3 lines? Does that make any sense to talk about remaining lines if you've not talked about the first line? No, it doesn't make any sense. So that should tell you it has to be kept. We've narrowed it down to 2 choices then. You can eliminate H and J because they delete that. So look at the rationale for F and G. Kept because it begins the description that is completed in the sentence that follows, or kept because it gives a clear image of what the first barcode looked like. It's F, right? Because it's the beginning of a description that's carried on in the next sentence. So my advice for you on the English portion of the ACTs, when you encounter a question like that, don't neglect to read the sentence that comes after it. So even though it's asking about the preceding sentence, the test takers here want you to get the wrong answer. They want you to just look at the preceding sentence. But you're smarter than that. So you look at the next sentence, and if you do that, you find the answer. 5, it's a word choice question. So it says up to 7 different arrangements were susceptible, and therefore 7 different encodings. Susceptible is not the right word. Possible is the right word, so it is C. So it's just about choosing the right word. I think those questions are easy, don't you? I think it's pretty easy to answer a diction question. Number 6 is a verb question. Today, 29 white lines making more than 500 million encodings possible. All right, so making is not the right tense. What should it be? White lines make more than 500 million encodings possible. J. Sometimes simple is better, right? All right, we've got another diction question here in number 7. It says, although successful, the concoction was both large and costly. Okay, so the concoction it's talking about here is a prototype scanner that used a 500-watt bulb, a photo multiplier tube, and an oscilloscope. All right, so that's not a concoction because you think of a concoction, you think about like liquid, right? A liquid concoction. Well, putting together some pieces of technology is not a concoction. It's a what? Contraption. B. Number 8, it's transition. Getting rid of it's not an option this time. So we've got to figure out. So it says, for example, progress stalled until the 1970s when laser technology became available. So you've got for example, as a result, however, and even so. It is G. How did you arrive at that? It's cause and effect. So if you can recognize that this is a cause and effect relationship, for example, is not cause and effect. However is not cause and effect. Even so is not cause and effect. However and even so are contrast, and for example is example. So you know that as a result is the only one that's cause effect. Number 9 is, let's see, it says, while the black lines absorb the light, the white lines reflect it back at a fixed mirror inside the scanner. This has to do with your pronoun and your antecedent. The antecedent is the noun that the pronoun takes the place of. What's the antecedent of it in that sentence? Not lines, light. While the black lines absorb the light, the white lines reflect it. So talking about light. So light is singular, it's singular. Would you change it to them? No. Would you change it to 1? No. So what are you going to do? No change, right? It's the correct pronoun antecedent agreement. Has to agree in number, in gender, and it does. Number 10 is a transition question. It says, which of the following true statements, if added here, would most effectively lead into the new subject of the paragraph? So here's one of those deals where you have to read the next paragraph to know what the new subject is. Today, being that there are 1 and 2 dimensional barcodes using numeric and alphanumeric symbologies, barcodes are used not only for a pack of gum or an airline ticket, but also for research. So this is talking about today, how barcodes have changed and advanced. Look at your options. Are you going to talk about the 1940s? Nope. You're going to talk about 1952? Nope. You're going to talk about 1970? Nope. But you are going to talk about J. Barcodes themselves have advanced as well. So you know that because this whole passage is arranged basically chronologically from the beginning of barcodes until modern day technology. Number 12, number 11. Number 11, I'm going to call that a sentence structure question. Today, being that there are 1 and 2 dimensional barcodes using numeric and alphanumeric symbologies, is that a complete sentence? It is not. So we have to change the sentence structure to make that an independent clause. Which one does that? B, there are. Today, there are 1 and 2 dimensional barcodes. So that eliminates the sentence fragment. Number 12, again, verb. Notice we've had 2 verb questions in this passage. Shaping the way we gather, track, and share information. No. In one study, for instance, tiny barcodes were placed on bees tracking their activities. Okay, so the problem is tracking. We need to change the verb tracking. So barcodes were placed on bees trying to track, which would track, or to track. Which one is the simplest way to say that? To track. So J. Does everyone see that that's the simplest and best verb tense? So if you recognize the question as a verb tense question, look to simplify the verb. So if there's a lot of ing ending verbs, that's probably wrong. So you want to go for a simple participial form of the verb. Number 13, one of my favorite, is a misplaced modifier. That happens to have been number 5 in the 7 deadly sins. We talked about misplaced modifiers. Remember what I've told you. If you have an opening phrase marked off by a comma, the word that comes right after the comma has to be the word that's being modified. So let's look at this sentence. It says, shaping the way we gather, track, and share information, comma. The very next word has to be what it is modifying. We have almost certainly exceeded even Woodland and Silver's expectation. So did we shape the way that we gather, track, and share information? No, we didn't do it. So that's a misplaced modifiers. Everybody see that that modifier is modifying the wrong word, right? That cannot be. So which one of those changes it to modify the correct subject? C. Barcodes are what shaped how we gather, track, and share information, right? So shaping the way we gather, track, and share information, comma, barcodes have almost certainly exceeded even Woodland and Silver's expectations. So that is C. Now we get to 14 and 15. This is about the passage as a whole. 14 says, for the sake of the logic and coherence of the essay, paragraph 3 should be placed. So if you go back and notice, at the beginning of each paragraph, there is a bracketed number. So paragraph 1 starts in 1948. Paragraph 2 says the first barcode was composed of 4 white lines at specific distances from each other on a black background. 3 says to create a barcode scanner, they adapted technology. And then they talk about today's scanners, and finally the advancement of barcodes. All of that's in chronological order. Should we rearrange it? Probably not. So what's the best answer? Essentially no change where it is now. And then 15 says, suppose the writer's primary purpose had been to describe how a specific technological advancement changed business practices. Would this essay accomplish that purpose? So is this essay about business practices? No, it's just about barcodes and how barcodes came about. So it's going to be a no. So that eliminates A and B. So you've got C and D to consider. No, because it focuses primarily on the development of barcodes, or no, because it focuses on why businesses needed new technology. C, right? It's just talking about the development of barcodes. How many no change did we have? 2, 3, 4. So we had 4 that were no change. So remember, don't shy away next Tuesday from marking no change, because 4 out of 15 answers were no change. Don't shy away from shortest answers. And as you read through the questions, try to just train your mind to think, what's the basic grammar problem here that they're trying to address, and how do I drill down and solve it? You can reason through that and find the right answer every time that you're willing to do that. Every single time. How many you have to get correct to get benchmark in English? By the way, what's benchmark in English? 18 is benchmark. How many questions out of 75 do you have to answer correctly? About 53%, 40. So 40 questions. If you can answer 40 questions correctly, that gives you a benchmark score of 18. So like on those practice tests that we've done, if you answered 40 correctly, and let's say that you can answer 6 more questions correctly on Tuesday, moving from 40 to 46, you would move your score from 18 to 21 with just 6 more questions correct. So that's huge, right? Moving from an 18 to a 21. And if you can move your English that far, think about what that does to your composite average. So just answering as few as 6 more questions correctly, which is very doable for everybody in this room, you can move your score tremendously. Some of you are on the upper end. So like if you scored a 26 on the practice test, that means you answered 60 out of 75 correctly. If you answered 6 more questions correctly and got 66 right, that would make you scoring a 31, which is tremendous. And there's some of you in here that I believe on Tuesday will score 30 or higher in English. It's just a few more questions. That's all it is. What about the English test do you feel like you still need practice with or still need help with? Like, are there some of these types of questions that you feel are still stumping you? Or is there maybe some things that we've not talked about in this passage that you feel like in English are things that you need to know? This is your opportunity to get the best score possible. Thousands of dollars are riding on this, no pressure. It's your scholarship opportunities that are riding on this. I want you to get the best score possible. Does this help? Talking through it and doing the practice, has it helped what we've done since August 10th? Good. Let's take a little break here. Let's take a break until about 10 minutes after 8. All right, so let's kind of put this aside. Help yourself to some snacks. I will be offended if you don't eat my snacks, so please take some with you. Even if you don't want it now, put it in your bag and eat it later. If you've not got a copy of the Kite Runner, get it. The assignment is to read the first 7 chapters by next Monday. Take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and do one more passage. Do one more passage. So I want you to look at passage 2. So that's numbers 16 through 30. This time I want you to answer it on your own. So kind of do the same kind of process. Try to figure out what's the basic grammar rule that's being tested. And instead of just a guessing game, let's figure out what the correct answer is. In numbers 16 through 30, no change will only be the correct answer one time. So I can kind of gauge you as you go through this. Only one correct answer will be no change. Take a few minutes and then we'll talk about right answers for numbers 16 through 30. sir. Okay, stop where you are and let's look at right answers for passage 2. Number 16, that's your one and only, no change. Number 17, shortest answer is the right answer, D. 18, shortest answer is the correct answer, delete, J. 19, the correct preposition is C, by. I was traveling by canoe. 20, correct answer is J, be utterly dark. That one has to do with tone, right? Feel as though it were downright ensconced in shadows. It's too casual. End up pretty hard to see. Too casual. Have not a lot of light. Too casual. So be utterly dark is the most formal way to say that. 21 is B. Surprised, I hesitantly turned toward her. 22 is J. Delete the underlined portion. 23D. Eliminate the semicolon. Remember, the rule for a semicolon is has to be a complete sentence on both sides of it. 24J. Each glowworm dangles. 25B. 26H, for example. 27B, the light.
Why is it?
On 27, because it's vague if you leave it them. The sound of splashing water, however, might signal that prey is nearby, causing the light to brighten. Because them is referring to, it should be light, not insects. 28H. 29A, yes, make the revision. And 28 was H. 29 was A. And then 30 is H, fate, colon. All right, we'll pick up with math tomorrow. Second period today, you're going to the library to do the pre-admin stuff where you have to do all the registration for next week's ACT. So Mr. Britt will be in the library doing that second period today. That's the way I understand it. Make sure you keep up with your packet. Bring it back tomorrow. We'll be doing math.